what? Some of us put our trust in people, and we are often disappointed. Others of us put our trust in our own selves, and we find ourselves falling short. Not all the time, just as with people, but sometimes we do. And I'm looking for the thing that we can put our trust in that is unfailing. Sometimes we put our trust into organizations and leaders, and boy, we see them fall short. What can I put my trust in? What is unshakable? What is the foundation of my life so that I can rely on without doubt? And that, my friends, I say is God. Well, today is what's today? Palm Sunday. Wow!
Sunday.
It's Sunday for sure. It's Sunday. It's 5:20. It's Palm Sunday. It's Palm Sunday in the Christian calendar, and it's always interesting to me to think about the Bible and think about how important these little sections in the Bible, like they're just like a few verses. And we've made them into these big deals. And it's not a bad thing, but it's curious, because there's this whole book of stuff, and there's just this little thing. So I want to share with you from the Gospel of Luke what this is all about. Well, Jesus was up in Bethphage, outside in Bethany, in the Mount of Olives, and he was getting ready to go into Jerusalem. And he didn't have a ride there, so he sent his friends that he hung out with, his apostles, right? He said, go in and get me a colt, get me a donkey that I can ride in on. And so they did. They went and found the colt, and they brought it back, the donkey, and they said, here it is. And they brought it to him. And after throwing their cloaks onto the colt, onto the donkey, they set Jesus on it. And as he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks on the road. And as he was now approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the deeds of power that they had seen, saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven. That's it. That's the story of Palm Sunday, is Jesus' ride into Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, and people being really excited about it. But what was he doing before that? Because this couldn't have happened. This wasn't going to happen without a bunch of other stuff happening before that. Like, what was he really doing before this happened? Well, you know what he was doing. He performed all sorts of miracles. He was healing the sick. He was making the blind see, the paralyzed walk. He was feeding multitudes of people. He was changing water to wine. He was doing all that sort of stuff. That's what he was doing. And what was he saying? He was saying things like, the kingdom of heaven is among us. He was saying, ask and you shall receive, knock and the door will be open to you. He was saying things like that. He was saying, everything from the Father through me. He was saying, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. He was teaching in very easy ways of understanding. He wasn't teaching in difficult ways. In fact, he used a lot of parables and stories so that people could understand in the time what he was talking about. And what else was he doing? Well, of course, if you read the Bible, you'll notice that Jesus prayed a lot. He was always separating himself from all the activity and going to the side and saying, hey guys, I need a little bit of time here. I need to get away. I need to go up to the mountaintop. I need to go into the Garden of Gethsemane before he began his journey to the cross to be crucified in front of Pontius Pilate. In fact, one of the Bible teachers that I took Bible from made this little, I guess it would be considered a long Facebook meme, but here's the way she put it. Jesus was a gospel-preaching, radically living, miracle-working, disciple-making, paradigm-shifting, salvation-bringing spiritual leader. He was a man of prayer. His life was steeped in prayer. His ministry was strengthened, and his mission sustained through prayer. That's who Jesus is and was. So that's what he was doing. He was teaching. He was performing miracles. He was praying. And people were psyched about it, psyched enough that when he was riding the donkey into Jerusalem, they were laying down palm fronds. They were laying down their cloaks. They were excited that he was going to be the new king. He was going to be the one that was going to save them from this ruling that was oppressive. And they were excited. They were excited. That's the story of Palm Sunday. That's the story that what actually happened, or the story of what might have happened, I would say. Because I don't know if anything in the Bible is true, but it doesn't matter because the story is what's rich. The story has something to say. Well, there's a way to look at this story metaphysically that I want to share a few elements of this story with you. Metaphysically simply means beyond the physical. Beyond the physical story, what else could this mean? And how could I bring meaning to it in my life today? Because that's what I want to know. I don't want to leave the story back when it might have happened. I want to know how I can use it today. Well, the word Jerusalem means place of peace. That's what Jerusalem means, place of peace. And a donkey, riding on a donkey, is a submissive way of arriving, a humble way of arriving. You know, instead of arriving on a steed, you know, the big white horse and the sword, you know, that's a different way to arrive. But to humbly arrive is to ride that donkey. And the pathway is an illustration of how we arrive at the peace within us. There's a pathway that we take, a pathway by which we arrive. So it's not just, oh, I'm here and then I'm here. It's a ride. It's a way to get. It's getting there. It's a process of getting there. That's a few metaphysical elements of what it is. But how do I use that then? How do I use those ideas? Well, this card is the perfect illustration of that, and you all have one. And this is exactly what the message is about today. Before peace, before arriving at that peace within myself, before arriving in my own personal Jerusalem, humility, trust, and understanding. That's the roadmap. That's how it works. So let me talk about those things if I could. What is humility? What does it mean to be humble? Well, the dictionary.com definition says to be conscious of one's failings, to not be proud or arrogant. Well, my definition, and I think that's good, but my definition is this: to recognize the sameness of our existence. To recognize that we're all in this together. To be humble is to recognize that. Are you with me? The practice of humility is simply remembering this truth, this one simple truth. And that is, none of us, not one of us accomplishes anything on our own. None of us do that. Ever. Ever. Do you believe that? Because we like to be fiercely independent, don't we? We're like, well, Paula, no, just wait a minute here. You know, I've studied. I've paid my dues. I've saved the money. I've got this award, I wrote a book, I did all these things. Well, I'm here to tell you, you didn't do that by yourself. You weren't the first one. All of us are standing and are operating on everyone who came before us. There is not one of us who isn't. But we like to think we're that independent person because we think we've done it ourselves. Not true. Not true. How much of our life and how much of our lives, everyone in here, have come about simply because you were born in the United States of America? Simply because you could afford maybe a college education. Simply because you had a mentor or a teacher or a parent or a life coach or anybody else who believed in you. Huh? That's what I'm talking about. How much of it is because of that? How much, think about this. Every day we get up, we think nothing of water actually coming to the tap in our bathroom or kitchen. We think nothing of turning a switch on and having electricity. We think absolutely nothing that we can press a button and be connected to the entire world through the internet. We don't think about any of those things. We take them for granted, but someone before us laid that groundwork. Someone before us laid that groundwork. I remember my grandparents, my dad's parents, still had an outdoor toilet when I was a young person. And we had the little porcelain pot beside the bed when we stayed over for grandma's. Everything that we've accomplished stands on the foundation of who came before us. And I think when we recognize our sameness as that is when we can be humble. When we realize that we really can't do anything on our own. We never have, even in our fierce independence, which has simply made us too proud and too arrogant to recognize that truth. That is the first step on the way to peace in our soul, is to remember to be humble, to recognize our sameness, and to realize that nothing we've ever accomplished we've done on our own. Absolutely nothing. To be humble. The second idea I want to talk about is this idea of understanding. This idea of understanding. To understand is to simply be, is to be sympathetic. Is to be sympathetic. It's not about solving someone else's problems or making life better for somebody. It's simply about being sympathetic, to be considerate of someone else. And the best way I've come to understand to be able to do that is this, and I blogged about it this week if you read my blog, is to simply walk in somebody else's shoes. Is to walk in somebody else's shoes. How often do we forget that someone can actually have a different life experience, and so they have a different perspective? I mean, that's the truth. They all haven't had the same experiences we've had. And don't get me wrong, understanding someone doesn't mean agreeing with them. It doesn't mean that I have to change my opinion because they've walked in these shoes and now I have to... No, it doesn't mean... It simply means to be considerate of it. To understand that someone else had a different experience, and so it could shape them in this way. For instance, do any of us really know what it's like to lose a child to violence? How many of us have actually had to choose between putting food on the table and paying a bill? How many of us have had a small business where we employ 5 or 6 people and know that every one of those people relies on us for their livelihood, and every decision we make that weighs on our conscience? How many of us have had that experience? How many of us have served in a war? How many of us have lost the only job they've ever known, and that job happens to be in a coal mine? How many of us have spent time in prison? How many of us have come from a country where we are persecuted for what we believe or who we love? How many of us know what it's like to be an addict? And here's what I say, if you have had any of those experiences, how do we expect another person to understand where we've come from? Even in those experiences, how can we expect someone to understand it? We cannot. We can simply practice understanding by walking in the other person's shoes, by acknowledging that they can have a different perspective. This is another stepping stone, my friends, on the way to peace in my soul. To peace in my soul. To understand another. The last idea is this idea of trust. Of trust. And trust means to rely on or to be confident in. And this is a good question for all of us. What do I put my trust in my life? What do I put my trust in? What do I rely on? What do I have confidence in without fail? Because I'll tell you what, some of us put our trust in people, and we are often disappointed. Others of us put our trust in our own selves, and we find ourselves falling short. Not all the time, just as with people, but sometimes we do. And I'm looking for the thing that we can put our trust in that is unfailing. Sometimes we put our trust into organizations and leaders, and boy, we see them fall short. What can I put my trust in? What is unshakable? What is the foundation of my life so that I can rely on without doubt? And that, my friends, I say is God. The God of my being. The God that I go to and say in these short prayers, just show me, lead me, guide me, heal me. Let me move out of the way and let that foundation, that absolute trust in something that's greater than me. in that greater energy in the world, in that greater God, in that greater universal mind, to put my trust there. I am saying this to you as much as I need to hear it myself. I can tell you in this minute that there is no other place that is guaranteed to deliver the healing, the abundance, and the possibility than there. To trust. That is another stepping stone to the place of peace in me, to the place of peace in you. The three: humility, understanding, and trust. Those three are our path to our own Jerusalem, to the place of peace, to the abiding peace in me. You know, that's exactly the life of Jesus. You know, he knew this stuff. He demonstrated it all. He demonstrated it all. He was the one, he thought about himself and about humanity in the humblest way. He was humble. He thought when he approached others, he was understanding. Did he ever, in the stories that we know about him, did he ever judge people? You know, maybe he did. He was human in that way. But his life was an example of understanding. And of course, where did he put his trust? In the God that he knew as Father. Everything from the Father through me. So it was a demonstration of how we can be on that path to Jerusalem. He said, follow me. He didn't say, follow after me. He said, do what I do. Here's what I did, and here was the result. The celebration on the path to abiding peace in me. And that's the story and the understanding that I have of Palm Sunday. Couldn't say that at the beginning, and I'll tell it to you now. So let's take all this into meditation this afternoon. That we can take this path. That we can use these ideas to put ourselves on the path to peace in our own soul, to be humble, to recognize the sameness that we are, to be understanding, to walk in each other's shoes, to recognize and acknowledge that there are different paths and different ways and perceptions of being. And for once and for all, especially when the difficulties come into our lives, to trust what is solid, to trust to the foundation of ourselves. This energy, this love, this power, this presence that we call God. Breathing in and breathing out as we spend these moments in meditation.